Today we're going to be talking about the Declaration of Human Rights, which was ratified by the United Nations in 1948. And Ann Lovejoy and the Inclusion Study Group are going to be tackling, looking at that document and how it might be different today, or how we could think about it differently today. And that's part of our 3 times a week Something to Talk About series here at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, which is sponsored by Fieldstone Memory Care of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone is offering innovative and compassionate care. They have recently opened their facility at Rolling Bay, so you can call 360-271-2530 and schedule a tour. 360-271-2530. Take a look at Fieldstone Memory Care, Bainbridge Island. Hello, all, Anne. Glad to talk to you today, and I'm interested in how you want to kick off this discussion about the Declaration of Human Rights.
It's a big discussion, isn't it? Thank you, Reed. I've hoped that everybody had a chance to at least refresh their memory and look through it. But if not, you can take a minute right now and look it up online, because the UN site is probably the most helpful. It has quite a lot of information about the different, the timing of the different articles and so forth. But what I think is really, oh dear, well, now I've done it. I've lost my Zoom piece. Here it is. I'm not good at shuffling all these different screens around. I think I would basically like to start out by asking some questions. Like, I feel like for many of us of our generation, we assumed that the basic human rights were in place for everybody. And I think for quite a lot of us, it was a bit of a shock in the last couple of years to discover just how wrong we were about the basic human rights in our own country, let alone around the world. I know growing up, I was quite aware, for instance, of the civil rights movement and various other rights movements, and recognized that people don't start rights movements unless they feel like they don't have those rights. Yeah, so lots of people have been feeling disenfranchised more and more. And looking at that together, like, I would have a couple questions. Some people have said, is this kind of declaration even still relevant today? Because it's so widespread. And other people are saying, are you kidding? What planet are you from? It's widespread if you're white. It's not very widespread, or rich. Not so widespread if you're not in a privileged culture or a privileged part of society. There are a number of groups petitioning to add to the Bill of Rights, add things they feel like haven't been included. So I'm curious if any of you have thought about this and would like to contribute your ideas about it or questions. Megan, you said you thought it was a bold, brave topic. Can you say a little about why you thought that? Put you on the spot there, girl. Maybe she's not there right now.
Well, I can say that it is interesting to read, because it definitely is traditionally, so to speak, paternalistically male gendered. All throughout it, it talks about the rights of men around the world. And I know that when the Interfaith Council, which has read this for years on December 10th, has read it, we've changed the name, the words to humans or people rather than men. So there are some things that are a little anachronistic in there.
Well, and actually, Eleanor Roosevelt is credited with having changed the word man to human beings in the first article, but it didn't get comprehensively carried through. You're quite right. Eleanor Roosevelt, in fact, was one of the prime movers for this whole movement back in the late 40s after World War II, when it became very clear to the comfortable parts of the world that there were a lot of uncomfortable parts of the world where human rights were not respected. I think there was less introspection about how well they have been respected in the so-called civilized world as well. But yeah, one of the big questions that's come up a lot from the queer community is, where are the rights of people who, like the right to be married or use the bathroom of choice if you are not a cisgender person, that is not well represented or called out, for instance. The parents of people who are disappeared in different countries have questions about what are the rights of a disappeared person? What are the rights of the family of people who have disappeared? What are the rights of missing Indigenous women and their families to a diligent search, for instance? So I think there's really a lot to look at and a lot to wonder about. Anybody else got a comment, Barbara?
Yeah, just to put this in a slightly larger context, maybe this morning I just read that for the first time the US has been added to the list of backsliding democracies.
Yeah.
So I think this discussion is especially timely and alarming.
Yeah, there actually was a McGill study last year that came out, and they said that human rights are unobtainable without a society to ensure their protection and realization. That you can say it all you want, but if the society doesn't actually come through and back it up and provide effective, what would you say, coverage, then it's just words. So what?
Agreed.
What do we do about that? How can we voice our, hopes that this can be a more just culture, a more just society, starting right here on Bainbridge and looking at Washington State and looking at our country?
This is Christina. I just wanted to also say what we see going on with Poland and Belarus and all of that engineered thing. We know that authoritarianism is very much on the rise worldwide, or at least they're trying to gain ground. And so when you have this Declaration of Human Rights, it's even more essential that we know about the document, that we know what's included, that we know it faults and where it falls short, because authoritarianism is trying hard to make certain that none of this is relevant, except, that no human rights are extended to anyone except who they believe should be extended human rights.
Exactly. And that's why democracy, we are seen as a country, the United States is now seen as a country in which democracy is eroding because exactly of the rise of authoritarianism and patriarchal subcultures within the country. Our culture is so famously polarized, but the polarizing effects are significantly like poles apart, right? What I guess I would say, how do we feel like we can help protect democracy within our own community, with our own state? And obviously writing letters and contacting our elected officials, people do that for a while and then get tired. But I want to remind everybody that it's actually a pretty effective tool, and that oftentimes the parties that are not particularly interested in a democratic society are very prompt and consistent about making their desires known or their displeasures known to elected officials. And people who are actually hoping for a more just and democratic society are maybe less inclined to do it more than a few times. But I think it's worth recalling that it's something that we could really consider doing every day. There's a wonderful app that you can get on the phone or a computer that's called 5 Calls. Mm-hmm. And it's great because you put your zip code in, or whichever zip code you want to put in, and it will give you a whole list of like, who are the people you can contact, how to get in touch with them. It also gives a list of what would you like to complain about today, or voice your opinion about today. And there's a whole list of them, and it gives you talking points. And I think it's really valuable. I've talked to quite a few of the people who answer the phones for our elected officials and said, does it really matter? And they all say, absolutely, it does. Please encourage people to call and call and call again. You can call the same 5 calls and get the same person each time. And that's totally okay. They're like, go for it, because we have to keep track. And every time we get a call and someone says, I really want you to support this bill, or I really want to see this initiative carried out, or I really do not want to see that happen here, we have the chance to make an effect. And it's an important part of our citizenship, I think, is standing up for democracy. Joan.
And I think also the writing of letters, put it down black on white and send it to them.
Mhm.
They can see it. It's in front of them. So there, you know?
Yes,
Get it out there.
absolutely. And, you know, remember we used to have letter writing campaigns.
Uh-huh.
Even a few years ago, emails were not included in the count, but now they are, because first of all, the last couple of years, there's been so much, you know, enforced isolation, social distancing, and so forth, and we weren't gathering in the same ways. And people were home more and using the emails and stuff more. And so now they're legitimate. They're collected as legitimate. But
Good.
you're right that the power of an actual handwritten letter is enormous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's a good idea about the internet, because I find the older I get, the harder it is for me, other people, to read my writing.
Amen.
So therefore, yell a little bit, you know, yell into
Yeah.
the phone or whatever. You don't have to yell, but what I mean is talk it out.
Right. Exactly. I think that's really important. Rebecca, are you putting your hand up? Oh,
Yes.
and Sheila. Actually, I think Sheila was maybe up first. Can we hear Sheila and then Rebecca? Sorry.
All I wanted to do was iterate once again what you're saying, Ann, about calling people or writing letters. I remember hearing Derek Kilmer back about 3 or 4 years ago when he was here, and talking about the necessity to get in touch with your local politician people. And even if you know that they are going to be voting in a certain way, still get in touch with them, because he said, we're looking for piles of stuff, and we're not looking for, we're looking for numbers. And if you can continue to add to the numbers, it will be perfectly great. I will never forget him saying that. And it's I'm sure it's very true.
It is very true. And, you know, it's easier to call than email even, right? Especially if you have arthritic hands like me. I could write all day and people would say, well, she wants something. I don't know what, because my handwriting has deteriorated a lot, but I can still type, and that's part of it. Rebecca, do you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add something. I agree with what everybody's saying, but I also think that speaking out, when you see somebody being discriminated against or treated badly, instead of thinking to yourself, oh gosh, that's so terrible, and then moving on. It's when somebody speaks out. And I'm a minority, and I'm Latina, and I've been discriminated against often in my life. But whenever somebody like you speaks out and confronts somebody else about the things that are happening, that's what makes a difference. It really does. And people like me feel like, okay, people do care. People do want to help. But, you know, when it's just, you know, all words, and I mean, if it's just things that are written and nobody's actually standing up for us, it's hard for us to believe that we're being protected.
And you're not. We had a bystander training here not too long ago, a few months ago. And one of the things by Chastity Malatesta, and one of the things Chastity said was that on Bainbridge, people do tend to stand up and speak out. And sometimes what might be even more helpful would be if they were to support the victim instead, support the person who's being attacked, rather than, because often if we jump in and are inflammatory, the flames get higher. But if instead we acknowledge, and someone were to come over and say, Rebecca, it looks like this is a really awkward, awful position. I'm so sorry. Can I stand with you? Or can I get you anything? That actually might be a better way for some of us who are a little over feisty to go right to the core of things and say, the heart of this is not this crazy person who's going off, but also this person who is now being attacked. I want to support you. And
that's why I moved to this island, because I saw that happening on this island.
Yeah, it's true. And it's, you know, something I think we can be proud of in a way, but I think we can also learn a wider tool set and know that there are times when You might just say, stop it, that's totally inappropriate, and then say, I'm going to support you. What can I do for you? Are you safe? Do you need anything? Right? And you have to figure out, are you safe? That's something that's important too. But yeah, we can't stand by and watch our democracy erode in front of our eyes. Joan, you want to say something?
Yes, another thing too, I remember years ago living in Montana, this student from MSU came door by door on a Sunday afternoon taking a survey because he was in political science. And he mentioned all these guys, and I says, nope, nope, too bad. He says, what exactly would you want your representative to do for you? And I backed up and I looked at him, I says, I want honesty. And he says, oh my gosh, never thought about that. That's a good one. And I thought, whoopee, it's about time somebody says something honest instead of these politicians who offer the world to you and they get in and baloney and then they turn around and do the opposite, you know. But anyhow, that's my take on that one. I've been wanting to share that for a long time.
I love that, Joan. Thank you. Honesty is so rare. It's awesome.
It is. And that's what I mean. Everybody else shuts the door, you know, and that's what they were doing to him on a Sunday afternoon because they were busy and they didn't want to be bothered. And I thought, what the hey? And I did.
That's great. Reed, did you have something?
Well, yeah, I did a little web search. You were, Barbara was talking earlier about the democracy backsliding.
Mm-hmm.
And the report was from the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, or International IDEA. And in an article I found, I didn't know this, on December 9th and 10th, Joe Biden is planning to host, and of course the 10th is the anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. On the 9th and 10th, he's planning to host the first of 2 summits for democracy.
I did not know that.
Which will bring together leaders from government and the private sector to try to put together an agenda for combating authoritarianism in the world. So it's also fighting corruption and promoting respect for human rights. And he apparently is going to do that this year with civil and private leaders, and then a year later to take the temperature of what might have happened in the last year. And I applaud that effort, and I think that maybe there might be ways that we can possibly get involved in that summit or in supporting it in some way.
When is that? December what?
9th and 10th, which is the 10th is the anniversary of the ratification of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that will keep it in our head as to when the summit is.
Put it on your calendar.
You put it on your calendar because it's also Friday, December 10th we are going to have another one of these programs, and we're going to be reading the articles, and I'm hoping to find a number of people who will be willing to come either in person or on Zoom. We'll do a hybrid meeting, but I would really like, and if you want to invite family and friends, kids, relatives, other people to come and read as well, I would like us to do a reading, and maybe there'll be time afterward to talk about it a little bit again. But I think it's just so important to remind ourselves and each other what this document is all about.
Yeah, there are 30 articles. And so maybe what we'll do is we'll each take an article and pass it on to the next person. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Megan.
Sorry, Rita, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I had to change to another computer. I don't know the meaning of all the buttons on the little one, so sorry about that. But Anne, you wanted to follow up on my question about what was it? Polarity? How to fix it?
You had just said that you thought this was a pretty bold, brave topic.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd like to hear what you think about that.
Well, what I was thinking of was that when the pandemic hit and political tensions were so high, I lost contact with a family member, my dad, as a result of that. And I've talked to other people who have had the same experience. They're not talking to certain family members because, you know, and actually what it comes down to is fear, you know, like, well, oh, okay, so you voted for Trump. That means since you're a gun owner, you know, I can't trust you anymore. And it seems that if our problem is polarity, then we need to talk to the people who don't agree with us.
Right.
And that's so scary to me because you know, we're always animals. We're always using our fight or flight system, trying to protect ourselves. And when people have such bold opinions on, you know, what's happening and what should be done, it's just so hard. I feel like we've kind of broken our relationships.
Yes, we have.
And I'm not sure how to fix it.
You know, I don't think anyone is, Megan, but I do feel personally that conversations of this nature are extremely helpful, especially facilitated so that they're safe. And like I said earlier, Zoom is really safe because nobody can throw anything at you. But I think part of the I mean, that was a little facetious, but I think one of the pieces that can be really helpful is to be truly curious about the other person's opinion. And because we often assume a great deal about what that might mean. And then we go in already, you're wrong. I can't believe you believe that. And we don't actually know what their motivations are or what their thoughts are. And it can be really quite interesting to discover why somebody does or doesn't believe this or that. So I think that cultivating true curiosity can be a real door opener for a conversation. And yeah, it can be really hard. We recently had a wonderful training from Donna Kramer, who is an instructor of nonviolent communication, similar to the compassionate listening skills. And she was working with the queer elder group on difficult conversations. And one of the first whole part is on listening. And the second whole part is on empathy. And sometimes that feels really difficult. How can you empathize with someone who feels so different and appears to believe things that you find really repugnant? And yet, without the empathy, we are not really being truthful. There's Joan's truth again, right? Because
but the best we can do in that, when we don't have anything in common with these family members, the best thing we can do is just listen to their rhetoric, because they're not in the position to listen to me. It's a dysfunctional dynamic.
yeah, and sometimes you're not going to get anywhere, but sometimes it's really quite interesting that Karen Vargas recently told me about an experience this summer where she was participating in a march in Bremerton, and some people were watching, and they were armed and carrying large guns. And Karen went over to talk to them, as she of course would, and said, "Hey, what you doing?" And they were like, "Well, we just want to show that we have the right to bear arms." And she said, "Yeah, I know that. I was in the military. I know guns." And they began talking, and she chatted for a while. And she said, "I'm just still curious about why you thought that was appropriate to come to a peace rally with guns, because it seems to me that's kind of not the message, but they had a good conversation." And she said that later a woman showed up at one of the Kitsap Erase Equity meetings and said, "Which one of you is Karen?" And she said me, and she said, "Wow, my mom wanted me to get on here and tell you that, like, I forget the guy's name, Joe's never listened to anybody in his life, but you actually made an impression on him and he actually respects you. And my mom was so astonished, she wants to meet you." And I thought that was hilarious. But Karen is a woman of color, and she has a background in the military, and she met these young guys with empathy and curiosity, but she stood really firm in her own convictions and made an impression without arguing or fighting. I think that's such a great, amazing skill set. And it's something I think a lot of us get caught in emotion, but when we don't carry that emotion into the conversation, or at least not as strongly, I think it does open the way for, like, those guys were able to talk to her in a much less confronting manner and feel heard. I just feel like we all have a lot to learn about communication. Read.
I would agree with that. I also think that that it is it takes practice, I guess, to figure out how to avoid going down the rabbit holes. I know I've had conversations related to the requirement we have at the senior center here for people who are participating in activities to post their vaccine records with us. And you know, one of the things that I have said is I'm not really in a position to argue the science one way or the other. I'm just not going to go into the, you know, you show me your argument, I'll show you my argument discussion, because I don't know, after a few paragraphs of what I might have read in the newspaper, that I could keep going. And that kind of discussion is usually escalates, I think. So it sounds like what Karen Vargas did was somehow, maybe through curiosity, ask for their experience, and then not sort of having immediate response, just letting it sit there might have been part of why it worked. I don't know. I'm open to other people's ideas about how to de-escalate.
Well, maybe we should invite Karen to have a program about how she de-escalates, because she's an amazing mistress of the skill. That's for sure. Rita? Oh, you're still
okay.
muted.
Here I am. I finally got myself unmuted. I think part of the thing that, and I'll just speak for myself, that is when somebody starts talking to you, no matter what it is, we start thinking immediately, and it's been proven, about a response to what it is. That we're going to respond to something. So that cuts off our listening to what other people are really saying and what we're trying to do. And I think the hardest thing for most of us, for me particularly, is just, or for sure, has been to listen. Just to listen to what somebody's saying without saying anything. But it has been a skill that I've been working on to develop over a long period of time. And it's very helpful, just listening to them and not saying anything, just listening and not trying to figure out if I'm going to have a response, because you know what? You don't always have to have a response to them. Sometimes you just need to listen to them. So that's what I find has been helpful in my own personal growth at trying to be more empathetic, and just to keep stuff quiet, and to let people, and to really learn what people are thinking.
Yeah, if we don't create space for them to do that, it doesn't work. And one of the therapists I worked with for a long time, who was a family counselor, said, some of the most effective things you can say are, wow, I'll need to think about that a little. And can you say more about that? And I was like, you're kidding. And he's like, no, if you can invite someone to say a little more, it does indicate that you're interested. It buys you time, and you might learn something really surprising. Joan, I'm sorry, Sheila, you had something.
Yeah. Well, I had an interesting conversation last night with a neighbor who is in the health field, and she and her husband had refused to get a booster. They did get the other 2 shots because she had to in order to work. They're both in their 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Number one, I was surprised. So I was like Rita, my initial thing was, what? Like, what? I don't believe that. And I said, well, like you said, tell me a little bit more about why you are refusing to get it. Her response was, I don't know enough about it. And there's nothing I could say about to that. She reads as much as I do, or she doesn't. The thing is that there was no ending to the conversation of, oh yes, I need to go and get a booster, which of course, being me, I would have said you shouldn't do that. I didn't do that. I just let her go on and on and on and talk about why not. We didn't get much further than I don't know why. And I don't know why they're not doing it. I don't know quite, but that doesn't make any difference. The point is, we started the conversation, and I found myself holding back a lot of not saying more than, oh, is that, where did you find out that information, for example, which I didn't mean it as a direct retribute, like, you're stupid, you found it from a different place, kind of thing. I don't know, where did you find that out? I'm interested, I'm curious to find out why you are where you are at.
Yeah, sometimes it can be kind of awkward and it can be useful to say something like, oh, I hadn't seen that. I wonder, where could I look for something like that?
Exactly.
Which puts it in a different frame, kind of.
Sure.
But Joan, would you like to say?
Yes. What's wrong with looking at them and smiling? Let that be the breaking point. Like, to read and walk up to the person and say, what's going on, and smile.
Actually, Joan, that's one of the techniques that can work really quite well in bystander training, that to break it up with humor, or we saw some examples of people sort of observing a difficult situation starting to build, and one of the guys just kind of rocked in there and said, hey guys, and accidentally pushed the person away. How's it going? Who's doing a thing? And then kind of putting his arm around someone, he said, let's walk over here. And it was sort of a jokey, not confrontational, but it just kind of diffused the whole thing. And I was like, now that was interesting. I don't know that I would have the.
But I've seen the young people do that.
Yes.
I've watched the young people do that, and I thought, wow.
Yeah.
You got it.
It's a good
Let's take
technique.
example from it.
Barbara.
Yeah, this is maybe a tad off topic, but it's something that clicked for me the other day to help me understand. And it was about vaccine hesitancy. And my first reaction is, you got to be kidding, that's ridiculous. And of course, how inappropriate is that? But the author talked about a factor that's at play sometimes, which is fear of making the wrong decision. So it's not necessarily about the vaccine, but just sort of an internal dynamic that people have about, well, what if I get it and then there are bad consequences and they don't want to accept that. So it's not just about the vaccine, it's just sort of their general approach to decision making and risk analysis. And I thought, oh, I can kind of understand that ambivalence. There are times I struggle with decisions, and I think that's part of what's at work. So it helped me maybe open my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Could ever consider switching to Medicare plan?
Oh, yeah.
I think I wonder if that, that to me, that's part of the idea of things like the Declaration of Human Rights, is to recognize that people can be coming from different perspectives, and they don't have to be idiots if you don't agree with them. There may be good reasons for the way people are the way they are.
Yeah, one study I was reading about vaccine hesitancy mentioned that, well, actually several of them have mentioned that for a number of communities of color, there have been many examples of places, of times when our government and other governments have abused the people horribly, and done scientific experiments that were harmful and painful without telling people, without disclosing, or hysterectomies to people who weren't prepared and didn't even know that's what was going to happen. Just a lot of things, and that things that were presented as vaccinations actually turned out to be giving people syphilis, for instance. We have a really, really ugly history, and we are not the only country that has that kind of history. And so I can really understand why, if there isn't a great deal of trust in a government or in a healthcare system that has not exhibited much care for, honestly, any of us. But so again, it's like, what are the words? It's, supposedly we're being promised care, but we may not be able to trust that. And I think that's a very legitimate reason why you might have a hesitant approach.
This friend of mine was telling me about a friend of hers, couple. They're moving out of Washington State because they don't believe in the mandate. And I'm thinking, people are going to go to whatever extent they need to in order to feel comfortable, number one. And number two, the fear of it all, like you were talking about before. And I was so taken aback twice now, not only that she didn't get any booster, but that actually there are people that are moving out of the state of Washington because they don't believe in the mandate, or they disagree with the mandate, maybe is a better way to put it.
And equally, people who are moving here, especially in the queer community, because they feel safer and more protected here than in many other states. So yeah, I mean, that movement, but all that movement does is just foster more polarization, really, right?
Right. So
I guess, again, when we're talking about human rights in our own community, in our, and anyone listened to the Port Madison dialogues recently with the Suquamish tribe and between Paulsbo and the tribe and the Kitsap Resolution Center, there were so many examples, like pretty much every single tribal person talked about relentless racism toward them all their lives in their own communities and, adjoining communities. And these are people who have been promised all kinds of things by treaties of our country. Like, I was really struck, though, that even though every tribal member had really difficult stories to tell, they all also said they really value their allies and were really gracious and forgiving and understanding of the fact that, they are a sovereign nation tucked into a larger nation that completely disrespects the treaties and their treaty rights. Yeah, and I just feel like we have so much to learn from people who have really been in the trenches forever and have managed to create like a very strong, healthy culture for the most part. Like, one of the tribe's main cultural values is to protect their elders, put their elders first. Well, look around. That's not a big piece of our national culture, is it? They have done everything possible to create great healthcare system and education. So much of the money that comes from the casino, for instance, and their fisheries goes to scholarships and goes to building elder housing and supporting the kids' education and reclaiming their language and rebuilding their culture. It's amazing to me. And it's like, there's an example of a struggling culture that's surviving and thriving and providing us with some really valuable lessons. One of the things we're going to look at next year is a lot more. We're going to be doing kind of a deeper dive into some of those lessons with some members of the Suquamish tribe who are going to talk to us about, for instance, how they combine their traditional fishing techniques with what they know about modern biology and water care for water systems. It's not just for them, it isn't only human rights. They would say there are planetary rights as well, that the soil and the air and the plants and the animals and everyone has basic rights that are not even included in this big list, right?
You know, there are ways that there is one thing that has happened, which I think is remarkably wonderful, is between the Highway Department, Polsbo, Suquamish tribe in the roundabout up there. The evolution from a straight Norwegian entry point type thing, sculpture, to working together, all of them together to have a combination of the different cultures that are involved in that area. And I found that discussion absolutely fascinating and very rewarding. And what would be another, I just felt really warm and wonderful about that because, and I can hardly wait to see this sculpture. It's going to go up. It's going to be gorgeous, but it brings together, it can happen, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It can happen that people can hear each other and come to a decision, which is apparently everybody is happy with, from what I've been told anyway.
Well, I've been thinking about what if we had a program with the Waterfront Homeowners Association and some people from the tribe talking about their traditional rights to harvest shellfish, and facilitated maybe with the Resolution Center, because you might need a good, powerful facilitator. Yeah. But why don't we reopen that conversation, which broke down years ago on Bainbridge? That might be something we could do in this format to kind of promote the right, the traditional rights and the treaty rights, right? Like, I'm trying to sort of say, what can we do here and now?
Well, and the thing about the Dispute Resolution Center, which I worked for 3 or 4 years at Worth, and which I so totally believe in, is the concept of transformational mediation. It doesn't mean that it's going to come to a response or to an answer at the end. Doesn't mean that at all. It means that people on either side are listening to each other and are hearing each other. Hopefully that's the transformation that we wanted to take place, no matter what kind of a situation it was. I bring up very quickly one that it seems like it's impossible. We had a couple, there was a restraining order. We couldn't have them in the same room with each other. And it was a matter of going from one room to the other, which I remember doing, and taking the information back and forth. Before you knew it, at the end, both of them were in the same room together. It was transformational. They didn't completely agree with everything, didn't make any difference. The point is they were listening to each other and accepting each other as human beings. And all right, that's my spiel about the Dispute Resolution Center.
That's a good spiel, Sheila.
Yeah, that's my thing. That's my thing.
I was going to say too, there's another opportunity if anybody cares to be a little more active in this community to attend school board meetings, because I don't know if you're all aware that Bainbridge has been targeted by a number of people, mostly out of Poulsbo and North Kitsap, who come regularly to the meetings and claim their 3-minute chance to talk, and usually rant about banning books and critical race theory, which is not being taught in our schools, and other things. And mainly the people on the island who are participating are homeschoolers who are incensed that their children might be uncomfortable, made uncomfortable by teachings that show that our white culture has been oppressive. And, you know, that's what the school board is hearing, and they're very gracious about it. They just say thank you. But it would be really helpful to them because they're beleaguered. This is happening big time, and some groups are starting to form around it, but I think it's really helpful if ordinary people show up and say, I just want to really appreciate the school board and the teachers for standing for the truth, for being willing to teach history that's a truthful history and not candy coated because somebody's feelings may be hurt. I really admire your courage, or whatever you want to say, but and take your whole 3 minutes, like read a poem, something, you know, just like take some of that time, because that could really be a respite and a help. And, you know, everybody is keeping track of the numbers. If the school district is very strong in committing to the Multicultural Advisory Committee being their giving them direction and in trying to be inclusionary in the classroom. But without parental support and community support, it's really difficult. So you can find out the school board schedule, where they meet and when, online. And showing up is a really powerful way you can help promote the right to education, truthful education, right here on our beautiful island. I was sort of hoping today that one of the things we could do is this, like, bring it home. It's one thing to sort of talk about the world and human rights around the world, but really we have things we can do right here and now that are important ones.
Very true.
I will, for one, say that I would like to be a part of that reading.
Great, thank you. Oh, yeah, anybody else volunteering? Good, thank you, Barbara. Rita, anybody else that I missed?
Yeah, you've got Rita,
Yep, I got Rita.
Barbara.
Yep. Oh, me, I'm willing.
Sheila.
Yeah, I got Sheila, Barbara,
Right.
Rita, Reed, me. And that's just great. It's, oh, thank you. Reed just posted the Bainbridge Island School Board's schedule, which will be, yeah, please do. Or, you know, you could also ask people who aren't not willing to attend themselves to write a letter, and you could read it.
Mhm.
Marcy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just watched the video. The video from the last meeting. They had people can call in and be put into the video or into the ongoing meeting, and it's worth take a look because it was a wonderful presentation from a Bainbridge Island resident and talking about the issues and what we are looking for and what we're supporting. And it was really worthwhile. So you just look at for the school Bainbridge Island Education Board meeting video. And it's not very well done video, but this particular one where she was allowed in is beautiful and very clear, very easy to understand. So,
oh, thank you. Reed, maybe you can find that and post it too, because that sounds great. Yeah, so with that makes it even easier because you don't even have to leave the comfort of your own home. You could call in. And like I said, you could read a letter that you'd written already or letter from friends. But I think this upswell of support is really, really important. And I know there are some librarians who are gathering and a group of upright business people in the community who are also participating. And I think that's going to make a big difference. Hi, sweetheart. My granddaughter just arrived.
Oh.
But I would love to hear if any of you others have ideas about local or regional things we can do. Rita.
Well, I mean, it said that all politics are local, and there's so much we can do. There's so much we can do locally, and if everybody does a little bit locally, it kind of sometimes gets into a swell. So trying to do as much local definitely as we can, which sometimes gives us the courage to do something else, maybe a little more regionally and then, more statewide, because sometimes this takes practice, even though we know what we want to say and we're outraged sometimes about what's going on, that it would be that we can do local. So I'm committed to helping locally.
Great.
So am I.
Great. And Barbara.
I really like the idea of supporting things that are happening locally that we like and that I like and align with my ideals, because I think we hear so much about the squeaky wheels that are opposed to everything. It's really incumbent upon us just to stand up for ourselves and also to support the people that are doing the work that's so important. Teachers, medical providers. So, this is a good reminder and a good push in that direction.
One of the things Chastity Malatesta had some of us do is write to some of the teachers and just thank them, and to the school board and thank them, and to anybody who's working at the schools. And that, I was really touched that every single person I wrote to wrote back and said, wow, thanks so much, or that's really great to hear, or oh, hey, you know my mom. I mean, it was like, it was just sweet. And it's like, we are elders. This is our responsibility as elders to step up and to start making our voices heard. And you're right, Barbara, I love to be for something. We don't only have to be against things, but when we see things we're for, let's make that really loud and clear too.